Hello everybody. I know what I'm saying sounds a little formal, but I just wanted to kind of welcome you all. Thank you so much for making the trek all the way to Mukilteo to spend this beautiful summer evening with us. It's really nice for us to have our friends over, and today is also a special occasion because my father-in-law Pravash Patnaik, he has recently published his memoirs, Counting the Stars, and we thought it would be really nice to introduce both of them, both my father-in-law and mother-in-law, to all our friends here, and use this occasion also for him to share a little bit about his book, what motivated him to write his memoirs, how he did it, and the message that he wants to convey through the book. So basically, I guess I just want to focus on two quick points before I hand it over to him. The first thing is, well, how did I meet them, right? How was I associated with these two incredibly wonderful people? Well, what happened was, and Vikas and I were friends back in the day. One day he said, "Why don't you come home with me? I'll introduce you to my parents." And I said, "Yeah, sure, let's go." And we were in our early 20s, and I went there, and we had tea together with both of them. And that occasion was memorable because it made me more determined to marry him. I told him that I like your parents so much. I like you more because of your parents. And so that was our first kind of connection with each other, and of course, the association has grown since then. But jumping to the book, just a quick sort of intro to the book before he takes it further. The book is basically about his life, and his life as a son of Orissa, the state of Orissa. Also, his life as one of the 6 sons of a freedom fighter in pre-independence India, and sort of the struggle with which he and his family. So his mother was essentially a single mom because father was always in jail, was very consistently in jail. So how he, as the eldest son of five other brothers, kind of grew up within the context of a lot of poverty, struggle. He supported his mother quite a bit, and succeeded to a large extent by studying hard, doing everything he could, making the cut to go to IIT Kharagpur, the first IIT in India at that time. An interesting stint there with friends, with sports. By the way, he also formed his association with his brother-in-law at that point, which led to his marriage to Mummy. And at this point, I want to say that, even though the book is about Papa, I think a lot needs to be said about Mummy also, because, I think maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but, perhaps the book would not have been written had she not been around.
Of course.
Right? So a lot of, we want to shine the spotlight on her also a little bit at this point. So it's written in a factual yet a very emotional fashion. There's a lot of emotion in there. It's a beautiful read. I really enjoyed it because I'd heard many of the tales and the stories at dinner table conversations. When I read the book, I really understood his life within the context of, him relating it in his own voice. So, I'm going to pass it over to you because you have much more to say. I don't want to take any more time, but
Okay.
it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Aisha. Thanks for those kind words. Is it on?
It's on.
Yeah. Firstly, let me say that well, I'm a little shy of too much of fanfare, so but it's a nice occasion. And good evening to everyone. Well, I have met some of you, but I was deliberately staying away for the simple reason that once I get into a conversation, then of course one starts telling about himself, and I didn't want to preempt the whole thing. Uh, yeah, actually, the family has been suggesting to me for quite some time to write a memoir or to write a book about on my life story, and often I was thinking, when because I used to discuss with them, I used to talk to them, particularly particularly the boys when they were growing up and all that, and subsequently after I also joined the family. Uh, but then the questions that used to come to my mind was, why should I write a book? There are a lot of whys and whats and whos. Why should I write a book? I mean, it should not appear as self-glorification, and I'm not a Barack Obama or Jawaharlal Nehru or somebody of that eminence. And the other thing also, the whats were, what do I write? What do I write? Do I write about my childhood, how we struggle through our difficult days? And then the third question was, who is going to read it? And why should people read it? So, I was struggling with that. But then came the phase of COVID pandemic, and India was very badly affected. And circumstantially, there are two years, 2020 and 2021. I used to be alone at home. My wife was in US with her, with both the sons. Uh, the flights were stopped. Traveling was restricted and all that, and I was stuck in India. And I had to go to India to take care of personal affairs. And then in those very lonely days when there was a lockdown all over, and there are not a single soul on the streets, that was a phase like that. So then I thought, why don't I sort of write something? And then of course, the memories came pouring in, the thoughts came pouring in, and I tried to write this book. And the sole objective of writing this book was, I wanted to convey to people people who were struggling in their life, that look, if you are clear in your goal and you try to do something in a focused way, you can make life meaningful, notwithstanding whatever hurdles come in life. So the main theme of this book is that, and so what happened was that then as I started writing, well, there are chapters by chapters, but so I thought, instead of I cannot call it an autobiography, because that's too sort of, giving a lot of self-importance. Autobiography is not really autobiography. It's a kind of a memoir of somebody who has struggled through life and could do something reasonably meaningful. I think the whole intent was that. And then so I can so it's not really a book reading. Well, I will call it, it's a book narrative. It's the narration of one's life and what one did, and how one sort of struggled through that. So what I will do is that I will be narrating it partially, and then also partially I will read a few paragraphs. So hopefully, you would like it when we go through it. The question comes, why the book is called Counting the Stars. It's like this. Oh, sorry. And why I called it Counting the Stars, and it starts from the dedication. When I was a little child, my father used to make me sit on his lap and asked me to count the stars in the sky. It used to be a beautiful sight, the blue sky studded with stars. He would point out the constellations and show me the pole star shining bright in the far corner of the sky. He used to tell me that it would improve my memory if I could count and remember the stars. Those were very rare occasions in the midst of his public life and prison terms. Truly enough, those memories are still deeply engraved in my mind. My father was a freedom fighter for India's independence and hardly stayed at home between leading people's agitation, underground escape from British police, and long-term prison terms. In the later years after independence, he led communist movements in Orissa, peasants' agitation for agrarian reforms, dedicated himself to social work, built educational institutions, and consciously stayed away from power-mongering politics. See, those days politics was very different, it's not like politics of the present time. My mother was a remarkable lady. She brought us up, her six children, I say you touched on that. He brought us up, her six children in our father's absence, without any recognizable earning, and always supported my father in the struggle for the country's freedom and in his other noble pursuits. She never put any pressure on him to move away from that path of virtue he had chosen. On the contrary, she was a co-traveler in their difficult journey together. I was her little companion in those years, being the eldest child in our struggle for survival. That taught me resilience and never to say die. And it's a fact, what I'm leading out here. I'm blessed to have those parents of mine. I often remember them in my lonely moments and would like to dedicate these writings to them. So this actually in a nutshell gives my background. Then when I go to preface, of course, I thought of writing, why I thought of writing this book, I have mentioned that already. In my early childhood, I grew up in an era when our country was on fire, fighting for our independence from the British rule. Many young educated youth had dedicated their lives to join the struggle, neglecting their personal well-being and families. My father was one such freedom fighter, and we struggled through poverty and deprivation. There were thousands of such families and millions of young children in our country who did experience similar fate in those years for liberation from colonial rule. We were not the only ones. I intend to share these writings, how we did plod through our life in my growing up phase in the midst of abject poverty and at times compromised dignity, with a dogged determination and self-belief to prove to ourselves that we can make it. I think these two paragraphs are really very uppermost in my mind. The country has progressed a lot since then compared to those dark years, but there is still enormous poverty all around, and it's truly a fact. And people struggling to make their both ends meet, children prematurely giving up their desire to make life meaningful due to lack of means and opportunities. If my experience of struggle through life can kindle a ray of hope in those children reconciling to their hopeless environment, I will feel immensely gratified. So that is really the theme, the reason why I wrote this book. The other paragraph I thought is actually very important to me, and I hope, looking back, sometimes I feel poverty could be a blessing in disguise that inculcates compassion, simplicity, humility, good values, and resilience. Unfortunately, many crumbled under that strain, but those who survive look back at life with a sense of fulfillment. I wish the narration in this book would generate the spirit of goodness and toughness and motivate the children from impoverished background to live with hope and determination, counting the stars. I wish to use the revenue generated from the sale of this book for offering scholarships to bright poor students of Orissa who are pursuing college education. That would give me, that would give them some relief from stress and anxiety and help them to realize their dream. Actually, I know that the sale of this book will not generate that much, but I will put in my personal funds and to sort of launch some scholarships. And of course, and my one of my classmates from Levansa College days, when I was studying inter science, his name is Sitakant Mahapatra. He is a, he was an extremely bright student. He was the topper of, well, he was the topper in inter science in the university, and he went into IAS. But he has got the Gyanpith Award, and if you know, Gyanpith Award is the highest literary award in the country. So Sitakant, he has got the Gyanpith Award, and he is a Padma Vibhushan. So Sitakant has written the foreword, very kind of him. Then I will just read one or two sentences. People like Pravash never retire from life. They only retire from a job. Life is greater than all the jobs we handle. That's one sentence he writes. And then he says, I have no doubt this book will be read and admired by scholars and writers. I'm sorry that a lot of my personal matters, I think that he has written. Well, I wish more publications from Pravash as follow up on this one. I also wish it should be translated and published in Odia so that more people can read it. So anyway, I think that's it. So that was his foreword. Then of course I start with my parents. My parents, my father grew up in a small village in Puri district. I think you know the Puri district in Orissa. Yeah. Well, it's a coastal region, and the village was so small that the nearest railway station used to be 10 miles away, and the only mode of transportation in those days used to be bullock carts. So a couple of times when we went in our childhood, so we used to go in the bullock carts, and it's a village where there is a small sort of it's not I won't call it a road, but it's more of a kind of a path or some kind of a walkway, and the houses were on both sides. So he grew up in that village and on the banks of river there, and afterwards that's the river on the banks of which that Kalinga War was fought between Asoka and the Kalinga battle was fought on the bank of that river. And when Asoka won after killing thousands of Oriya soldiers, that river had become red in color, and sitting on a hilltop, when he saw that ghastly sight, he turned to Buddhism. So anyway, so that river was this village was located on the bank of the river. My father, of course, was studying in Levansa College when he was he was on crossroads thinking, I mentioned the country was on fire, so he was on crossroad whether to join the freedom movement or pursue his studies, because a lot of these young students used to give up their studies and join the movement. So that's the time he was a very sort of little bit of a revolutionary type. So he wrote to Gandhiji asking what should he do, and Gandhiji's response was that, well, you should join the movement, but then get back to education afterwards. So it so happened that he of course, he joined the freedom struggle, and when he came back, having moved away from the mainstream education, he, well, there are four national institutes which the leaders had created. One was Kashi Vidyapit in Banaras. There was one in Gujarat, and there was some place in South. So my father went back to Kashi Vidyapit, and where he, of course, he's completed his the degree, the BA equivalent degree was called Sastri, and his contemporary was Lal Bahadur Shastri, who became the second Prime Minister of India. So Lal Bahadur's name actually became Shastri. His name is Shastri because of the degree he got from the Vidyapit. And of course, his teachers were all people like Dr. Sampurnanand and just a minute, Acharya Narendra Dev, Siprakash, and others. They were great, socialist people with socialist ideas. So the idea of socialism got got implanted in his mind in those years in Kashi Vidyapit. My mother came from a Jamindar family. Jamindar are the landlords. So she came from a rich family, and their marriage was very unique. Because my mother also was a little revolutionary type. Though she would be going to these areas where untouchables lived, and sort of clean the streets there with the girls from there, and comb their hair and those kind of things. I mean, all this. Okay, I'm not going to narrate all the details. So they got married, and when my father came for the marriage, he didn't want he didn't want to be carried in a palanquin. Palanquin is that palki, and when where people carry their palki in their shoulders. So he refused to sit on a palki where people are carrying him, and he's sitting there on the palki. Well, I hope these things are making some sense to you. And then and then when he got down from the and people were surprised that where is the bridegroom, and he was walking by the side of the palki. And then when they, of course, they know the bridegroom is walking by side of palki, and there is another tradition that that some valet would wash the feet and all that kind of thing, and he refused that to be done. So he wanted to wash his own feet and all that kind of thing. This before he got into the marriage pandal. And then the marriage did take place, of course, and my father didn't have a home to take his new bride, nor did he have any income. And it was strange feeling for my mother coming from an affluent landlord family. He took my mother to his brother's home, the only shelter they had. His brother his brother worked for the king of Kalikot. Kalikot is Orissa is full of very many princely states. So it was a princely estate on the banks of on the banks of Lake Chilka. Lake Chilka is a lagoon from Bay of Bengal. So he took him there, and his brother was doing some land administration. But as soon as and then of course, he would be traveling, and he would be away for the agitations and all that kind of thing. And whenever he would come to meet my mother, the informers of the king would inform to the king that, that look, here the young man has come. And the king would immediately call my uncle, means my father's elder brother, and ask my father to leave the estate. So that is how, and then he would, of course, he would leave the state. So those were my parents' honeymoon days. I mean, they were prevented from sort of, meeting each other or staying together. Well, in 1936, Orissa became separate state, and of course that state assembly and separate assemblies were formed, and Congress decided to participate in the electoral process. So the Orissa State Assembly had 60 members. More than half of them were all nominated, and it was not adult franchise. The people who could vote are the people who are matriculates, people who could pay tax, who did pay taxes and all that kind of taxes to the British government and all that. So it was not an adult franchise. So then, so there are 60 members, and half of them were nominated by the British government, and they were all the princely state, the kings and the princes of different states, and also the Rai Bahadurs, Khan Bahadurs, and Rai Sahibs and all that. Those who are supporters of the British government, and running their own estate, and having a good kind of a situation of alliance. So, but my father was a candidate, of course, one of the Congress candidates. Jawaharlal Nehru came for the election campaign, because Congress was fighting all over the country in every state, and so he came for his election campaign, and he won the election, of course, but he was very young. He was 31 years old, so he was one of the youngest MLAs of the first Orissa Assembly. Then of course, the Quit India movement and all that, and where he was in the jail for 2.5 years in one stretch in that present term. After that present term, of course, that is the time the Congress Socialist Party was getting formed, and Congress Socialist Party was getting formed, and then then the Communist Party started, and he was one of the founder members of the Communist Party. 1957 general election was a great year for communists who wanted to participate in the electoral process, and he again won the election, and he was leader of the Communist Party in Orissa State Assembly, and that is the time the parliament, even the national parliament had more than 60 communist members, and Nabudirpal formed the communist government in Kerala and all that. So that was of course a very landmark victory for him. While he was busy with the freedom struggle and thereafter the communist movement, but that time politics was different. The whole total objective was politics was people's service. No personal gain or anything like that. As a matter of fact, even the communists were holding a very sort of powerful position in the assembly, because the government could be formed with their support. So they were asked to join the cabinet, but they refused. They said that we will support you from outside, but not be a part of the government. But in the midst of all that, he was of course doing other social work. He started a kind of a high school in the town where we were living, and then thereafter he started a college, and all those schools and college, all that school and that college, they were named after him, and and they have really sort of changed the changed the educational pattern in that area, in those areas. It was early 70s. Well, I was working in Calcutta, and I had gone to Bhubaneswar for a short holiday, and we went to. My father was in an adjoining place in Bhubaneswar, adjoining to Bhubaneswar, and we went to see him, both me and my wife, and Vikas also was there with a small child. So when we went there, that time he was not keeping well, because that life was very tough. They used to do a lot of padayatras and all that. So when I went to see, he was in the party office, I think, resting, and it was a Communist Party office is not a big thing. So he was in the. And somebody the comrade caretaker who was taking care of him said that, look, it seems some of your relations have come to meet you. So he came out. It was a thatched roof, and kind of not a great floor. So he came, and there was a lamp burning behind. So he came back. He got up and came to the door, and he was holding the door, stretching both his arms. And then when I saw him, I was absolutely shocked. He was frail. He was absolutely weak. And then I, of course, thought the end is not very far. And that was the day when I was coming back. Even I couldn't control myself. So. And then, of course, we suggested that you must come to Calcutta, because I was in Calcutta that time. I was working. So he said he would, and he did come after a week, and he stayed with us for about 6-7 months until he passed away in Calcutta. We did try to get the proper treatment, but whatever the treatment used to be in those years. Well, I felt he had prostate cancer from which he died, but he had so many problems, osteoporosis and diabetes and all that kind of thing. So we couldn't really make him survive. But the only thing is that when he died, that is the time I was telling to Sanjay that how my suitcase parrot was there in the corporate carrier. So I was transferred from Calcutta to Pune, and I was wondering how to take him, because when you shift, you stay in a hotel for some days and all that kind of thing. And when I used to discuss with him what we could do and all that, he used to always tell me, don't worry, because time takes care of a lot of things. And he had the premonition that perhaps he won't live much longer, and it did happen. He passed away in Calcutta. My mother lived for some years after that, and of course, my younger brothers were growing up, so she was taking care of those. She had taken care of them and all that, and she had a stroke, and the nice thing is that the whole, not the nice thing, the coincidence was he passed away on a day of Ganesh Chaturthi. Ganesh Chaturthi is a big occasion, big religious occasion, and so when he passed away, me and two of my brothers were there with her, and I was standing in the morning, standing by her bedside. She was groaning with pain, and in that hospital compound, there was a flower tree, a kind of a tree, a flowering tree, where you pick up those white flowers. So, and there are many, there are a few small children who are plucking the flowers. And it crossed my mind that when we were growing up, we had the same tree in our compound, and we used to pick up those flowers, take to our mother. She used to make the garland to take and to go to sort of offer to Lord Ganesha, and for wisdom and for learning and all that. So, but then then she passed away in the evening. My childhood was again in the midst of all this. It was of course very difficult, and actually we didn't have any source of income. And I'll just mention one or two incidents. Uh, all these are written in the book, but I think if I start, I can't be reading all that. It was like this. We had we had a neighbor who used to uh, be the manager of a petrol depot, no, kerosene depot, sorry, who used to be the manager of a kerosene depot, and he was, he was trying to help us from time to time. So when I was a little child, 4 to 5 years old, actually we used to live in a place called Jatni. Jatni is a place. It's a big railway junction. People, when you go to Puri, and that the railway junction used to come on Calcutta Madras main Grand Trunk route, and from that main route, the railway line bifurcates to go to Puri, which is a about 30 miles away. And and then so that uncle of mine, he was kind enough to organize something for us, and that's very funny. When kerosene was in short supply in those years, and well, it's very difficult to get kerosene, and also people couldn't afford it also. So what they used to do when they from the depot, big depots, kerosene depots, when the petrol used to, when the kerosene used to be drawn, there used to be some leakage which used to fall on the, which they used to collect in a tray. And then I used to go and pick up that kerosene which was collected in the tray, and then I will bring it home in a can. And then we used to, of course, light our lamps with that. But more than that, a part of it we used to barter with people, these women vegetable vendors who used to come to sell vegetables from villages. So that we used to barter kerosene with them, and they would give us some vegetables and all that. So that was an interesting experience in life. The other thing is that when I did in between, that neighbor of ours, we used to call him uncle. So he was going to Calcutta. So, and at that time, one of my Masi, that's my mother's sister, used to be in Calcutta because her husband was a pilot in Kalinga Airlines. So then my mother said, okay, you can also go to Calcutta and just go and see the city and come back. So I went with him, and I didn't have I didn't have proper shoes, so I went with my rubber slippers, and then when I reached my Masi's place, So my Masi was a little surprised that look, I don't have proper shoes. So she immediately took me to, to Charangi. If you know Calcutta, the main street of Calcutta, where this big hotel like Grand Hotel and all located. Grand Hotel, Metro Cinema was located and all that. So he took me to Charangi, and from a Bata shop, she bought me a pair of shoes. And then of course before that was bought purchase. I was walking on Charangi in front of Grand Hotel with that with those rubber slippers on, and the whole irony was that subsequently in my working career, there were many occasions I used to go and stay in Grand Hotel because I used to, I mean, of course, because we used to have our board meetings and all that there. So I used to stay in Grand Hotel, and every time I stepped out of Grand Hotel onto that footpath, I always remembered that once upon a time I was walking here with rubber slippers, and I used to just laugh to myself that how life can change. So that was that, and then there are quite some very funny stories happened in life. After my matriculation, I was also, I went again to Calcutta, and I was, my uncle used to work in Kharagpur. He was not a big shot again. He was a time office clerk in the railway loco shed. So, and then that is the time, and that was 1953, and the IIT had come up in 1951, the first IIT. So when my cousin sisters, they used to say that, there's a beautiful engineering college which has come up here, and the students are there from all parts of the country, and they are so smart, and all that kind of thing. And I used to listen to I did listen to them in with a touristic interest, but I didn't know that 2 years after I will be studying there. So these are some of the very interesting things, and and of course in those years, Gandhiji's assassination was a big jolt to us in January 1948. This paragraph I would like to read because these are the driving things. The country was moving forward on the path of development and progress. I'm talking after independence in 1953 when I finished my matriculation. New steel plants were being planned, hydroelectric power projects were being constructed, railway locomotive and coach factories were being built, educational institutions for higher learning were being set up. That gave hopes for future and prompted young minds to dream, along with the realization that one can make something out of life through one's own merit and hard work. It became the propelling drive for the younger generation in the emerging India. Then of course I had a short stint in Revansa College. I did my ISc from there. Something very interesting happened there. I think when I was studying into science, well, the people who stayed back in Congress, of course, they became ministers and all that kind of thing. There was one gentleman. I didn't put any names because obviously I shouldn't. He was a minister of state in government of India, in the center. A very powerful minister. Afterwards, he also became governor of Gujarat and all that. So, and he was a distant relation of ours, from my mother's side. So my mother said, why don't you go and meet him? When I was studying ISc, why don't you go and meet him because, he can suggest what you should study and what you should do. And we could extend some help. But, so I went to meet him, and he, of course, he listened to me what I was doing. I said I'm studying inter science and I want to decide what I should do after this and all that. So he said that look, you know, there is an engineering school in Cuttack. You know, Ravensa College was in Cuttack. So there is an engineering school here. Why don't you do a diploma from there, and you will get a job of an overseer, and it's a very assured job, and you could and then well you'll have a career with that. I came back very disappointed. I thought, no, no, and now I think I felt what the hell, but that time I of course I was not thinking that way. But I came back very disappointed. My intention was not to be an overseer in the state government. So then of course then well that is the time this after ISC luckily what happened I was not clear how I can pursue my further education because because further education means you have to go out of state and you have to spend money and all that. But that's the time Government of Orissa came out with some loan stipends. They used to give a loan stipend of 4,000 rupees for 4-year studies in an engineering college, so 1,000 rupees per year. And so that gave a ray of hope, at least there is something. And then wanted to see what to do. And then of course I applied and I got into IIT, and interestingly that was the first year. That was the first year, the first four batches. Actually I'm the fifth batch of IITs, all IITs. The other IITs hadn't come up, and that was 1955. So and they started this entrance examination, this for the first time. So we had no reference also, what kind of paper should come and what kind of questions should come. Nothing knowing. So all we knew is that there are 3 subjects: English, mathematics, and drawing. And drawing is something one doesn't know what is drawing. But anyway, so one did qualify for that. And of course, your inter-science marks and the ranks and all that kind of thing. And then I joined IIT. But well, that was not the end of the struggle because IIT studies. IIT studies, of course, certainly, with 1,000 rupees one can't manage, and even in those years, 60 rupees used to be the mess bill per month and the tuition and all that kind of thing. But very interestingly and very luckily, IIT had that time, because it's central government institute and it was Nehru's dream to start IIT. So there used to be scholarships given, if you, and there was examination for that again, entrance test, now examination to get the scholarship. So what happened was that there was merit scholarship and merit come poverty scholarship. But the competition was so tough because many had come after their BSc and all that, and we had all gone after inter-science. So obviously it was not that easy. Actually, I didn't qualify for a scholarship, neither merit nor merit come poverty. And then that is the stage I thought that look, my IIT dreams are over. Because there is no other means, because 1,000 rupees would not support me in IIT. So this is also the interesting turn of events. So I was really thinking what to do, and it was very embarrassing that somebody packs up after joining because you couldn't. Yeah, I mean he couldn't fund the education. So what I did was we had a professor, Dr. B.R. Seth. I'm very obliged to these people, so Dr. Seth was a very, very prominent professor. Actually, he was a maths professor. So he was the chairman of the scholarship committee, and he was the chairman of student gymkhana. He was a very, very powerful personality. So then I thought before I leave IIT and pack up my things and go home, at least I must go and meet him. And all this one was doing, one was 16, 17 years old. Well, I was 16 years old. So so when the classes used to got over and all the students went, because I couldn't enter into his room, when all students are around. So I just gently knocked in his room, and I said, "Sir, can I come in?" He said, "Yeah." So then I narrated to him my predicament. I said that, "Look, this is what it is. I'm here with a loan stipend, and I can't afford my studies with this. And now I have to decide to go back." He listened to me. He didn't say anything. He says, "Okay, let me think about it, and just let me review it." And then a week after that, well, I was awarded a merit cum poverty scholarship. So, 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 well, it was another 60 rupees a month. So with that, I could go. I could just uh, go through my IIT studies. So these are and the other the thing is that later, much later, once I was flying from Calcutta, from Bombay to Calcutta, and Dr. Seth was there in the flight, and I saw him. So I just walked up to him, and I said that, "Sir, I'm such and such, and well, I was a student when you were there, and I mean, I didn't say the scholarship and all that thing. I said that I was a student when you were there. At that time, he was the vice chancellor of Gauhati University. So he was in that. So he just looked up to me, smiled. He says, "Well, it's good to meet you and all that, and good luck to you." And I thought to myself, that good luck actually he had bestowed on me years back. So those are all small incidents in life. Well, IIT was of course interesting, and I used to be a good sportsman. Now, of course, well, I have difficulty in walking, but I used to be a good sportsman, playing soccer, volleyball, athletics, and all that. And of course, I very narrowly missed the Bhandarkar Cup, which is awarded to the best all-rounder, because representing IIT in three sports events, and reasonably good in studies. So those were then of course then comes the my early years in industry. Of course, I again being a mechanical engineer. Well, I had of course a very interesting phase of mm, interesting training in Integral Coach Factory, which was a fantastic factory in Perambur, Madras, and I enjoyed it immensely. And I was the first student trainee there because it was approved by the Ministry of Railways, and I was the first student trainee in ICF. But that was a very interesting training, and more than that, it was my interesting experience in Chennai, and that time Madras, of course. So, but then early years industry, of course, I joined the automobile industry. Naturally, a hardcore mechanical engineer. Uh, Started from Hindustan Motors. They used to make cars. Then joined Telco uh, in their auto division for 3 years. Uh, and then and the only one thing was just worth mentioning there is when I was in Jamshedpur in Telco, there was a huge communal riot in the city. It used to so happen that these Hindu refugees who were sort of running away from Bangladesh, from the then East Pakistan. They were being carried in by special trains to Dandakaran, and Dandakaran was a settlement for for the refugees from East Pakistan. So and that train used to pass through Jamshedpur, and a lot of Hindu organization used to go and offer lunch and all to all these refugees. And on one occasion, when one such train was passing, and people went to offer lunch in the train to these refugees, they were so upset and agitated seeing their plight. When they came back from the railway station, they started the riot. They started burning all Muslim shops, killing Muslim families in whichever locality they used to live. And and it was very badly affected because Telco had a lot of Muslims. And we had one chap in our planning office who was a Muslim. And it was a Saturday, and in no time the office got evacuated. Saturdays were half days, so in no time the office got evacuated, and everybody left. And this Muslim colleague of mine, he was just trembling because he didn't know what to do. He cannot step out because he will be killed and all that. And I was watching it, and I was the only person who was staying behind and watching his plight. Then I told him that, look, you come, I will take you. Well, I had a scooter in those years, so I put him on my pillion, and we drove to his place. And as we were driving, we found that all the colony in the colony, all the Muslim quarters which were there, all their belongings were burned to the courtyard, to the compound in front, and they were being burnt. And people, we don't know what happened. People must have been killed also. Then when we approached his house, I wanted to take him to his house. Luckily, his family was not there. When I approached his house, I found his belongings also were burning in the compound. So we saw it from the distance. Then I said that let's go back because we can't take the chance because he will be killed and perhaps I will be killed also, thinking that he is also. So we came back, and then I kept him in my house or in my quarter. And then around this was all around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, in the noon. And around 2 o'clock or so, a relief van came announcing that, look, any Muslims who are taking refuge somewhere, they should come out and we'll take them to relief camp. I made sure it's a genuine announcement. So I just let him go. And all other people from the other flats, they were watching that, somebody came out of this apartment and going to that bus which was carrying them to the relief camp. And of course he left and he was safe. And in the same evening, same afternoon, I got a message. I got a message from the Bihari, or let's say from the Hindu contractors who were working in some nearby construction site. They're saying that, look, stop this kind of missionary activity, otherwise you will be in trouble. But it really didn't bother me. I was alone, and I didn't care for it because I thought what my conscience told me to do, I did that. Then comes a very interesting phase of my life. Those of us, now I'm writing about a friend for life. Those of us who joined IIT after intermediate science were in the age group of 16 to 17 years old. Some of us came from big cities, some from small towns, from different socio-economic background, having gone through different schooling and college education. The only thing we had in common was the strong academic fundamentals and the desire to do something meaningful in life. The other thing that brought the fresh entrants together was the initial phase of ragging. People nowadays, of course, very critical of ragging, but okay. When our mannerisms, idiosyncrasies, strengths and weaknesses got exposed without any inhibitions. Besides this, there was a curiosity to know each other because we came from different parts of the country. All our friends those years were very close, all the IIT friends, helpful and peculiar bonding existed because we went through the same growing up process in IIT in the formative phase of our life. So this was the kind of general background, what one went through. But then, then I had I had a friend who was very close to me. We are very close because we perhaps we thought alike, or yeah, and we had the same taste and all that kind of thing. And he was Subhash Mehrotra, who, who happened to be afterwards my brother-in-law. Now he, of course, he was doing civil engineering, and we were in the same hostel. And he went back and joined the civil engineering department. He joined the UP irrigation, located in a very remote place in the foothills of Nainital. And I was, of course, working in Calcutta. In the Puja holidays, I thought that, I would give him a surprise visit. And then he thought he would give me a surprise visit. So I took a train and went sort of, after about 30 hours train journey. And these were the Puja holidays, yeah. And I reached that, that little remote place, remote village, I would say. It's not a village truly. They used to do a lot of lumbering activities and all that around, but there was a small rivulet flowing, and and he was sort of doing some work on this, on the irrigation activity from there. So when I went and reached there, they say that he's not there. He has gone. He has gone in his Puja holidays. And then I thought that he might have gone home. So I came to here. I knew his hometown. It was Barabanki, just adjacent to Lucknow. And so I took the same kind of the next train came back to Barabanki. But that was something, it turned out to be a life-changing experience for me. I didn't realize where destiny was leading me to. Barabanki was a typical UP town, very crowded in those years in 1959. And that late October, when I reached Subhash's place in the evening, that was a very unique experience. Actually, his father was the government advocate. Barabanki is a district headquarters, so he was the government advocate. And he was sitting in his office and preparing some legal brief and all that. And I went and I, of course, introduced myself. I said, I'm Subhash's friend. I had gone to meet him in Kicha, where he was, where he's supposed to be there in foothills of Nainital. And they said that he has gone in the Puja holidays. So then, so he said, no, he hasn't come home. Then it dawned on me that he might have gone to Calcutta, because where else he can go? So, but that turned out to be so unique in my life. But he was one of the smartest person I have come across in my life. Even now also I feel so. I have worked in corporate world and all that. But he is one of the smartest person I have come across. In 1 hour's time, he was so brilliant and bright. He sort of asked me many questions, wanted to know me thoroughly and all that, just out of curiosity. No intention, no. And to give his background, he was, of course, he came from a very sort of rich background. His father was a extremely famous lawyer, whose earnings were in gold coins and gunny bags, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, he passed away very early. His father, my father-in-law's father. And when my father-in-law was studying in Lucknow University, he used to have a car and driver. And he played excellent tennis, and he played for Lucknow University, and they played in the finals of Intervarsity. tennis championship, and they lost in the finals, to Nagpur University in Nagpur, in their home, in their home ground. And he won his singles, but they, they lost the second singles because he was number one singles player, and they lost the doubles. But the person whom he had defeated from Nagpur University is number one. He went on to become, he went on to play Davis Cup for India. So, so he was that smart, and he was, well, I was terribly impressed by him. And he said that, look, there is no train for you to go back to Calcutta, so you could only go next morning. So you just don't worry, you stay at home. And that was really so amazing. And then of course I was there, and I became a kind of an object of I became some kind of an exhibition to the family, because they were all surrounding, including my wife. As a young girl, trying to watch how I was eating roti and sabji, roti with that kind of thing. So, but then of course I went back, and Suhas of course was in Calcutta, so we spent a few days thereafter and all that. But then slowly this relationship increased, and I used to visit them from time to time, and I became a part of the family. But then at a certain stage, we were looking for higher studies. He wanted to come to States for his masters and PhD and all that. I also wanted to do a PhD, and I got actually an East German scholarship, but somehow it didn't materialize. I wanted to, yeah, but he had to, he got a scholarship because he was in teaching. From UP irrigation, he changed to teaching, and he was teaching, so he got a scholarship, and he came to US. But before, and we knew that we were going to part now, and then we thought that. And then we thought to ourselves, why not we just cement our relationship. We are so close friends. So that is the time the idea cropped up that that I could perhaps marry his sister, who was and who is a very attractive, charming lady. So then but he was stubborn enough to sort of he was strong and forthright to propose it to his family, and I was I was apprehensive how it will be received, simply because nobody knew. I mean, except from having met me, nobody knew my family. They had not met my parents. They didn't know my financial background. They didn't know anything about me, and completely sort of different parts of the country, from Lucknow to Orissa, Bhubaneswar. So I was not, I was really uncomfortable. I thought it would be a very, very strong rejection. But then, surprisingly, that his parents and his grandmother and all, uh, they sort of they accepted they went along, they started thinking about it, and interstate marriage and intercaste marriage were not known in those years. But so the most interesting thing was that uh, here I read that I became lovingly indebted to the family when they accepted the proposal. More heartening was the response from from Sudha, is my wife's name. That she was a very young girl. She was studying in IT college in Lucknow, which is a very famous college for girls, like IT College of Lucknow, Grand House of Delhi. These are some of the top colleges for the girls. More, more, more heartening was the response from Sudha herself, who at a tender age of 19, shyly, smilingly, and silently accepted the proposal, and willingly came forward to embrace the challenges she was going to encounter in the unforeseen unknown phase of her life ahead of unfortunate phase of life ahead with me. I was deeply touched. So that's how our marriage did take place. Anyway, so that is that, and then of course, and then it's very sad that we of course, uh, yeah, he passed away very early. Suhas passed away very early. He was 67 years. He got prostate cancer and he passed away. And when he was hospitalized, I did come from India to see him, and I was with him for a fortnight in the hospital. And there you and I used to be there day in and day out, both night and day and night. And one of the nurses, one day she asked, how are you related? Are you then before I could say anything, he said very promptly, saying that, well, we are friends for life, and and incidentally, he happens to be my brother-in-law. So yeah, and this paragraph. Well, in retrospect, Suhas changed my life in a big way. He brought me together with his beautiful, loving sister in marriage, who gave me two lovely sons. Well, it's being personal, so please pardon me. Stood by me in making my life and building my career. She stood by me in making my life and building my career. I say you were talking about sort of my complimenting her. He integrated me with his affectionate, charming family from a totally different cultural background, which helped me to look beyond the boundaries of caste, community, and state. Above all, he got me the blessings of Swamiji. You see, their family was devotees of Swamiji. He was a saint who meditated in a cave like Calcutta. And what happened was that we had a one bedroom apartment where we were living after I got married, and with a kind of a dingy kitchen. So my wife used to cook there, with a chula kind of thing. And the chula was that with coal-fired chula where you have to blow through a kind of a steel pipe. So that and then she had a rickety rack which with the gentle touch, where the groceries and the spices were kept with a gentle touch, it could fall, and it did fall on her on one such occasion. And we had a scooter, and one day, we wanted to go out for a morning show movie, and the cow grazing in the adjoining field chased after our scooter, and she sort of out of fear she jumped up from the scooter and fell, and that's the time I thought I should buy a second-hand car, which I did, and then of course that is that. That was our early life, uh, and then after about 4 years or so, my plant manager, he of course did help quite a lot, in my career growth and all that. He sort of, proposed my promotion. I was 30 years old, and he proposed my promotion to senior management cadre. And when the promotion was proposed, the managing director he turned it down. He says, he's too young to be promoted to senior management cadre. And then because that boss of mine he repeated the whole incident to me. He said the managing director said, what do you think? He's a Napoleon. So anyway, so that was that. But he did get sort of get the promotion through by taking help of other directors and all that. And then then I went for after some time, well, there was an international conference in Casterly, Belgium, in the Belgian woods. So I went for that, and the two interesting things which came out in that conference was, One was India was fighting the Bangladesh war in those days, and about 1 million refugees had crossed over to India, crossed over to West Bengal and India, and they were being rehabilitated. So it used to sort of attract headline news in the European newspapers, and that became a talking point in our conference. Well, after the conference program, well, in the evening drinks, over the evening drinks, and they were asking that, look, hey, how are you able to handle this? No, not 1 million, 10 million people have crossed over. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. 10 million people have crossed over, not 1 million. So they used to say that, how are you handling this? How is your country handling it? Because, they were, Belgium's population in those years used to be 9 million. Netherlands used to be 13 million. So, 10 million people having crossed over to India, I mean, it was unimaginable. But anyway, so that of course, and they were, and the big topic was that, is Bangladesh a kind of a viable country? Can that country survive? Because that country had some agriculture which used to get devastated every year because of floods of Brahmaputra and Padma, which is a branch of Ganges, the major branch of Ganges, and then the second thing was that they had, and second thing that they had only fishing as their main earning source. So there were a lot of discussion on that. The other discussion that was about uh, the shifting of activity to Far East, because all the European factories were sort of reducing their activities, going to Singapore and all that. So there are a lot of objection to that, saying that, look, why this is happening? Because why are you shifting? But but then of course, I thought that it turned out to be a very viable thing, because and I will touch on that. The dollar productivity was, of course, much higher in the Far East compared to Europe. How, whatever maybe the mechanization and all that, but still the dollar productivity is high. And then, so that is the time the technical director changed, and I was getting a little restless about my future growth. So I talked to the new technical director and said that, look, well, I'm looking forward. I want to know what's my future career, or what's my career prospects. He listened to me. He was a very seasoned manager. He was prime manager of several factories in Europe before becoming the technical director in India. So he looked at me and he said that, look, the previous technical director had left a note of concern about your growth, and then he said that, he was a very elderly person. He said that, we like ambitious people, because ambitious people deliver. And then he said that the next factory that will come up, you will be the factory manager there. So that, and it did happen after a few years. So then, of course, a new factory, Philips started to make lighting fittings. I was the plant manager of that. I started that factory, and people who know Calcutta, it was on Talatala Road, on a leased land from the Port Trust of Calcutta. So it was a very interesting experience. And then 3 years, no, or rather 2 years, I had done that. When the factory was ready, I was shifted to take over the big factory of Calcutta, the big factory in Calcutta, which was a consumer electronics factory, the factory where I had joined. So, but then there I want to mention that, there my experience was very interesting, because uh, I what used to have, we used to have a wage negotiation every 3 years. Can you put some lights on?
That's what I was thinking.
We used to have wage negotiation every 3 years. And every wage negotiation was a very prolonged tussle between the union and the management. And those days, the union, the whole trade union activity was very strong in India, all over the country. And Calcutta had, of course, a leftist government, a communist government that time. And so, we had a big strike in our factory. And what happened is that, and they used, actually it was a stay-in strike. So the workers used to come, enter into the factory. Nobody declares a lockout, because lockout means you must know also how to come out of a lockout. Because lockout is not really that easy to handle and to close and to sort of end it. So and they will come and do agitations and demonstrations in the plant manager's office. Every in batches of 60 to 70 they would come, and in the course of the day there will be 6 or 7 such demonstrations. Now, in one such demonstration there was a rowdy guy. So they would come and say that, look, hey, we have never had a strike here, and in your time it is there, and all that kind of thing. So one such rowdy guy, on one occasion, during the demonstration from the back, he started saying, calling my name. He said, Mr. Patnaik, you are from Orissa. I said, yes. I just said, yes. He said, Lord Jagannath, the big Hindu Lord, Hindu God, he had a chopped arm. And I tell you, everybody, all the other people, all the people who are demonstrating, they were absolutely stunned, and they became silent. But what he was hinting was that, look, we will chop off your arm. So he said that Lord Jagannath had a chopped arm, and there was a pin drop silence, and I was, of course, listening. I just gave him a stern look, and then after that, immediately the whole demonstration dispersed. They all went back. And the same day it was the management from Bombay, from head office, both the directors, technical director, personal director, they said that, look, Pravash, from tomorrow you are not going to the factory. You will sit in Toligans Club and manage the thing from there. Means, take stock of the things from there, what's happening in the factory. But all my management staff were coming to the factory, so they were subjected to the same kind of demonstration and all that. I told them politely that I can't do that. I mean, I can't be sitting in the club and sort of monitoring things from there, and when my people are, my other management colleagues are there. So, yeah, so then, then what happened? Then after that, the union stopped that kind of demonstration. But the good thing that happened is that that's the time the Communist Party was having a conclave in the outskirts of Calcutta, in Howrah. They were having a kind of a party congress, and all the communist leaders had come. So one of the communist leaders from Tamil Nadu, and he was also a Rajya Sabha member, means the upper house of parliament. He was there. He had come to attend that conference, and he was a personal friend. He was, I won't say friend. He was a kind of a personal. I mean, we knew him closely and all that. So he came home for dinner, and then I told to him that what we are going through. I said that, look, this is what's happening. So he says, have you talked to the Chief Minister, Mr. Jyoti Basu, who was a communist Chief Minister? I said, no. He said, no, okay, then I will organize your meeting with Mr. Jyoti Basu. You were the Chief Minister. And he did that. And immediately following that, well, it's very interesting how things happen in life. You know, on a New Year's Day, when the government offices are closed, on the 1st of January 1979, both the chief minister and the labor minister came to writers building, which is the secretariat of West Bengal government, and we were there, me and my personal manager and the other factory manager who was my successor in the lighting fittings factory. We went and met Mr. Jyoti Basu, and then I presented to him that, look, if this way the activities in Calcutta factory would go on, this activity will slowly shift, because the productivity in Pune factory was much higher. So then they listened to it and they realized it, and then in the next 2 days' time, they instructed the union to come and sit on the negotiation table, and we struck an agreement, and it was perhaps the first time in Calcutta when an agreement was signed by the union and the management to improve productivity in the factory, because no union would sign that, but it happened through the intervention of the chief minister and the labor minister. But then, of course, this is something I want to emphasize. Actually, I strongly believed that leaders were there for their people, and they could not isolate themselves in ivory towers. So so what used to happen? My office was, I made it a point that my office was a kind of had an open door. My secretary was very, very tough. She wouldn't let anybody come in, and I was not liking it. But I was also conscious that she's trying to do my do my time management. So people, when she used to go for lunch, even workmen would come and knock at the door and say that, "Sir, can I come in?" And of course, in Bengali, they would say, and they would come in, and they would just narrate their story, and it was so pathetic. And then subsequently, it dawned on me that, look, I realized that, look, all that stress of productivity, all that importance of productivity, had one fault or one folly, that we productivity, you measure like this, output in standard hours over the clock hours. So that means in 60 minutes of clock hour, how many minutes of standard work output you produce, you produce or you deliver. Belgian factories used to work at 78 M's or 78 minutes. In 60 minutes, they would deliver 78 minutes work. But Pune factories used to deliver around 62 minutes, 63 minutes, still more than 60 minutes. But Calcutta factory would be around 50 odd minutes, 55 minutes and all that kind of thing. So, they realized it, and so that's how the whole thing got settled. But in that measurement of productivity, nobody considered, all other factors were considered, but nobody considered the socio-economic background. You see, people would be traveling in local trains for half an hour, taking a bus from the metro station to the factory, and before coming, they would be cooking food for their family, for their husband, for their children, for their, I'm talking of the female operators, the girl operators, their in-laws and all that before coming. So those factors, and also the healthcare system, their educational facilities, those things were never brought into consideration in productivity measurement. So the real, subsequently it was realized that real productivity is not how many standard aims are delivered in a clock hour, but it's the dollar productivity. How much dollar you spend in the labor, in the labor cost in an Indian factory and and let's say in a factory in Europe. That is the important thing, because the dollar productivity in India is very high because our workers are not paid as much as a worker in a factory in Europe. So that is how that took us back to industrial activity shifting from Europe to Singapore, from Singapore to China, from China to Vietnam. So that was a very interesting, interesting realization. But slowly, I think just most of the industries started realizing that. Most of the companies, particularly the multinationals, they realize that it's the dollar productivity which is important. You can't be just sort of changing. And then, of course, the same thing, Pune also, we had two massive labor problems, but it got. But if that we tackle in a different way. Then this is the time. Well, I was getting a little restless as plant manager. By that time I had managed 3 factories. For 11 years. So then something interesting happened. Philips appointed a consultant from New Zealand, to identify high flyers in the organization. So somehow then in that process, well, I was also sort of flagged out. And then I was transferred to head office, to hold a corporate function, which I did. And of course, well, I was responsible for corporate purchase, corporate logistics. The company was not doing well because our logistics were in a mess. And when of course I did, I did streamline that, So that got me a lot of mileage. And then there was another area which was actually Philips in India was not doing well that time. So one of the reasons was the poor logistics. The other thing was that we had one product division which was not doing well and making losses for past 18 years, ever since it started. And the management wanted to close it down. So they because I had the managing director particularly had a lot of trust in me. So he asked me to close it down, and in 4 months' time. And in that process, when I went to meet the senior managers of that product division, and it was in Turf Club in Pune. And I called them. I called a meeting, and because I wanted to know their background and about them, so that they can be suitably redeployed, because you don't ask everybody to go. And then I called them for a dinner, and we were around the dinner table. It was very interesting, And we were around the dinner table, and then I asked everybody to introduce themselves. Believe me, there were around 14 people around the table, including me, and 8 of them turned out to be from different IITs, and 3 of them were Philips International Institute scholars, and one of them was from Pune Engineering College, and he was a Hindu Hitachi scholar. I was taken aback that how with this kind of people heading different departments, the product division is making losses for 18 years continuously. And that night, believe me, in the Turf Club, I didn't sleep up to around 1 o'clock or so in the night, thinking, what should I suggest? Should I suggest to sort of close down this product division, or should I try to turn it around? And it's one of the it is the high-tech business of Philips, professional electronics products, everything, stuff, whether it is railway station announcement, stadium announcements, steel plant announcements, fire detection systems, and also all the electronic test and all the electronic instruments like analytical X-ray, electron optics. all those business we were handling. So then I said, no, actually it will be unfair to close down this business and hand over the business to to competition on a platter. So I 4 months after I told I went back. We met the managing director, finance director, and myself. We met in our beach house in Marway over lunch, and actually it was a weekend. So and then I told them that look, we should not be closing it down. It can be turned around. And to cut it short, we did turn it around, and the first year we made about 17% PBT, profit before tax, and the subsequent years we made around 15% profit before tax, and it became a very sort of good product division. That's the time the managing director was leaving the country. He had come to sort of turn around Philips in India, and he was leaving. He was leaving for Hong Kong. I mean, he was wanting to get a placement in Europe, but as CEO, a big country like Germany or France or something. But but China was coming up, so he was the CEO. He was transferred to China, Hong Kong. He was transferred as CEO of China, Hong Kong, China, and he wanted to. He told me this thing. He told me honest. He told me that he wanted to take me with him. But those are the years, a lot of these Dutch expatriates were coming back from different countries because, every country wanted to have their local managers. So the Dutch expatriates were coming back, and it was very difficult for, to find a place in a senior position. So then, of course, he sort of, he got the board of management's approval and sort of, uh, in his position, he sort of promoted me to the board of management of Philips in India. So that's how I became a director, senior vice president of the company. So that was that, and then of course Philips had a retirement age of 60 years, and I was up, I was 7 8 years in the board, and then of course I was turning 60, so I retired. After retirement, it was years. So, and then the deputy ambassador, he says that look, if you don't accept Mr. And me and my wife, we are actually sitting slightly in a kind of a back row because I knew what was going to happen. So he said that look, if Mr. Patnaik is not elected as you don't accept him as the president, the embassy will withdraw its patronage to FTSE. Everybody was stunned, and I myself got stunned because I never knew that they have so much of trust. So anyway, so of course then everybody was quiet and all that. So I became the president and all that. So that was a very strong support from the embassy. Now, I think I will be concluding my narratives, but I want to just read one paragraph of my last page. Life has flowed like a river, starting from a small origin, going through the process of evolution, like the river widens downstream, creating its new limiting conditions as the river has its embankment, moving through uncharted territory towards an unknown vastness after traversing the set course, like the river flowing towards the vast ocean. Actually, that's what really life is, You start from a small beginning. You don't know what's the territory you are going to cover. It's an uncharted territory. You just flow down as the river widens. Also, the person evolves. The time gone by would never come back, just as the water that has flown down the river would never be reversed. However, the only difference in this analogy is that the only difference in this analogy is that the river does not have the ability to look back, whereas we human beings have the memory and the sense of nostalgia to recollect our past with mixed feelings. Sometimes these memories are overwhelming. So that's how life has been. And of course, there are a few more sentences. I miss India, when I'm away from the country for too long. There is a peculiar charm and sweetness in India. Its culture, music, festivities, countryside and mountains and rivers, and the people in general. Poverty has made our people simple, humble, and compassionate. If there are any aberrations in the social structure, these are unfortunately created by a few people in power for their personal interest and the administrative systems. I wanted to do something for my country and for our people after my working career, but due to fatigue from a demanding career, increasing age and health limitations, I felt that I would not be able to do full justice to this endeavor. So that's why, well, I am where, I am where I am. My concluding thing, well, I have learned through my experience in life that dreams to do something meaningful can be realized in spite of various hurdles coming on the way by focusing on one's goal with dedicated application, strong determination, and a will to win. Well, I have taken a lot of time, and really the objective was to sort of share this last paragraph with not with elite people like you, but people who are struggling in their life. Well, thank you very much. So yeah, what should I say? It's so late already, but if any short query or something, I could answer it.
Or what we could do is, I know it's getting late for dinner also, so maybe people get their dinner and then we can just have a
If
conversation.
there is anything, but okay, I just leave it to people. So if somebody wants to know
Anyone
more
have a
about-
burning question? In context of what was said. Okay, so we can come back.
Yeah, okay, I mean,
Updates and
if there is something, but let's have dinner,
yeah,
because you will help me to
yeah.
get out.
No, this is fine. I'll put on those lights.
Why didn't you put on that light?
I will. I was going to help you.
Actually, I was just feeling that, we were.
See?
I think it's okay. No, we could have more light. We didn't get a lamp. So later on, your reading was a bit difficult.
This one? This one?
Yeah, I'm going to.